All right. Thank you. I think this is a presentation some people thought they were getting yesterday. So thank you for sitting with me yesterday. um, this is the one about nutrient density. Um, so we don't have the time we had yesterday. I'm going to try to move somewhat efficiently through the presentation so that we have time for Q&A. All right. Eat it. I mean, the microphone. um, I'm going to move as efficiently as I can through the presentation so we have time for Q&A. We've got only an hour together, and I'm sure we could spend more than that on this topic. So quickly, I'll save the introduction. I gave that yesterday. This is the farm I grew up on in central Massachusetts, which is in the northeast corner of the U.S., small homestead. The term right there in the middle, nutrient density, is one that I coined about 18 years ago, 17 years ago, to refer to this concept of the nutritional variation in food, which I thought was quite important and had a number of meaningful implications. And, there's some really important strategic possibilities. And at that point in time, there was no word for this concept. This is also the front page of the website of the organization that I'm the founder and executive director of, the Bionutrient Food Association. All right. The BFA was founded in 2010 with a mission to increase quality in the food supply. By quality, we mean flavor, aroma, health-giving attribute, nutritional value, not aesthetic, a volume, sort of the inherent, goodness of the food, not the surface aesthetic of the food. Our general agenda is that the caliber of the goodness of food for everyone on the planet next year is higher than it is this year, and in 2 years it's higher than it is next year. That's our agenda. Is that we want all food for all humans on the entire planet to be better year after year after year. That gives us freedom to roam. There's plenty of opportunity in that space for things to occur. Even in the past couple of years, I've broadened that beyond the physical substance food when I feel like talking about more subtle things like thought and emotion and conversation. I think that what we ingest and who we are, has a lot to do with the physical things we take in, but also the ideas, the emotions, the concepts that we take in and hold and project out. So we'd really like that all to be more coherent and improved over time. The initial few years of the organization were as an education work. We did courses. We have held conferences. We had local chapters. You can see a few people here who are, some of them perhaps you recognize, that we've had speak at our conference. This is a very small list, but some of the perhaps more famous on the list. Every single recording from every single workshop, from every single conference that we've ever had is on our YouTube page for free for the planet. So I think I mentioned that yesterday. There's a lot of hours of stuff on there. I think that one of the opportunities, responsibilities of privilege is to empower others. They can feel guilty about your privilege, or you can do something with it. And my thought is, let's do what we have with our privilege. That's what we've got, so use it. Historically, we're an educational organization at our roots, at our grassroots, and functionally, through word of mouth, our courses spread from the Northeast U.S. to other parts of the country and then to other countries. And as I said yesterday, I always tell people, don't take my word for it. Go out and experiment. And if it's true, it'll work. And if it works, it'll spread. And what happened over the first few years was we got to be giving these courses to people in broader and broader geographic settings, different scales, different soil types, different crops. And it sure looked like, regardless of whether it was small holders, polycultures, broad acre, hot, dry, cold, wet, didn't really seem to matter. Working with nature was causing soil health to improve, farm viability to improve, pest and disease resistance to improve, shelf life to improve, flavor to improve. We're like, okay, if it seems to be true that pretty much anywhere you go, working with nature has all these concomitant benefits, this is the kind of thing that needs to happen in a larger scale. And so then the question was, how do you scale? How do you take something that is so systemically beneficial and implement it in today's cultural milieu, which is not necessarily entirely coherent? So our thought was that we would use economics as our lever. Our thought was that money is a powerful force in today's day and age, and if we can align economic incentive with ecological incentive, with human health incentive, we might have a winning hand. So the basic vision was we want to provide the capacity for anyone who purchases food the ability to discern the relative nutritional caliber of the options they have available to them. So if you're a wholesaler, if you're a retailer, if you're a processor, you're a packer, you're a chef, you're an eater, anybody in the supply chain who purchases food, our thought was if we can provide them the capacity to understand of the 3 choices available, this one's 20 out of 100, this one's 40, this one's 80. Our thesis is the 80s will be chosen more. That will apply an economic incentive to the supply chain to focus on nutritional value as opposed to volume and aesthetic. So that's the basic insight. To accomplish it, we identified 3 things that needed to be true for this to be a viable strategy. This was done in 2016 when we sort of devised the sort of conceptual framework. The first thought was we thought that nutritional variation in food is significant. Not everyone agreed. When we went and talked to the researchers, the PhDs, the people at universities, and said, we think nutritional variation is massive, they said, we don't. The second thing we thought was that not only is nutritional variation significant, but it correlates with soil health, with overall system function. And the researchers we talked to said maybe the variation is 2% or 5%, but that's probably has everything to do with genetics or soil type. Soil health, this is again 8 years ago, so I think soil health has come a long way in that time. The third question or the concept we had was that it is possible to build handheld, consumer-priced ray guns, basically, that you can flash a light at a thing and see what it is made up of. This is a science instrument in your hand. Think of the tricorder in Star Trek, right? Like, broop. So if we can read what stars are made up of 20 million light years away with the flash of light, you know how long a light year is? That's a bunch of space. 20 million light years. I mean, we're I think 10,000 light years away. We can read the atmosphere of planets right now. Like, this planet has methane in its atmosphere 10,000 light years away. Like, that's what we can do in science. If we can read the atmosphere of a planet 10,000 light years away, we think we can read what a carrot's made up of a millimeter away. Right? So these are our three thoughts, is that this is possible. So we started in 2017 building our first meter. We then in 2018 built our first lab where we asked farmers that year to send in carrots and spinach from across the country. This was just US at that point in time. We wanted carrots and spinach from the point of purchase. We're not doing side-by-side replicated randomized trials. We're not doing any kind of control. We're saying we want to actually survey what the caliber of food is that people have access to them, have access to. So organic, not organic, grocery store, farmer's market, farm stand, garden, just survey the basic nature of food through this Western empirical framework. That was 2018. 2019, we set up our second lab out in Chico State in California. That year, we were able to increase to 6 crops, but as well, we began working with farmers, and we said, when you're taking your carrots in triplicate, or your cherry tomatoes in triplicate, or your spinach in triplicate, please take the soil in triplicate at 0 to 10 centimeters and 10 to 20 centimeters, and as well answer this 50 question questionnaire. What was the variety you planted? Where did you buy it? When did you plant it? How did you prepare the soil? Did you cover crop? With what? How did you terminate it? Did you irrigate? How often? What was your source? What was your fertility program? So as many environmental conditions data as possible, overlaid against the soil metrics, overlaid against the nutrient levels in the crop. In 2020, we set up our third lab in France, and we were able to go up to almost 20 crops. You can see here, this is the 2020 data broadly. So every green icon is a farm that was doing that, soil, crop, and management data. The orange icons are citizen scientists who are sending in stuff from a point of purchase. You can see the number of samples of each crop there on the right. You can see at the middle the metrics we're looking at in the soil. On the left, the metrics we're looking at in the crops. All told, we assessed almost 10,000 crop samples, almost 8,000 soil samples, multiple years, multiple continents, sort of a survey of the supply chain. A data set we're not aware of anyone else having created to begin to provide the Western rational framework through which these questions could be assessed. Because even though we farmers have common sense and pretty much know these things are true, to go and engage the scientists, we have to speak their language. So what I'm going to show you next are slides that are on carrots. Understand that we have data like this on more than 20 different crops, but I'm going to run through a few slides here with carrots and understand it's remarkably similar across the board. So I'm going to point out a bunch of things here. This is not just carrots. This is carrots, but for anybody who wants, all the data is open. We have this data explorer you can access online. You can interrogate with all these questions. You can look and see. But effectively, this is symptomatic of what we found. So over here on the left, sulfur is an element. You can see on the vertical axis, 0, 20, 40, 60. On the horizontal axis, 8.41 is the lowest level of sulfur, milligrams per 100 grams of fresh weight. The highest level we found was 33.19. That's basically a 4x variation, as in you would have to eat 4 of the carrots on the left to get as much sulfur as if you ate 1 of the carrots on the right. The fifths of the range, the red, orange, yellow, light green, dark green, if 8.41 was 0, 33.19 is 100, then the red is 0 to 20, the orange is 20 to 40, the yellow is 40 to 60, etc. So what you can see here basically is this is a bell curve, which probably means we got something resembling real data. It's a natural distribution. The peak of the curve is there in the 22nd to 23rd percentile. There's a big drop off at the 50th percentile. There's not a hell of a lot of samples between 80 and 100. So there's a dramatic variation. If we consider sulfur to be a positive thing, then most stuff is relatively poor. On the right, phosphorus, 11.7, 93.69. That's an 8x variation. You'd have to eat 8 of the ones on the left to get as much as one of the ones on the right. The peak of the curve is in the 27th percentile. Anybody here go to college? When I went to college, we had this thing called grades. And if you were at 90 or above, it was some kind of an A. And 80 to 89 was a B, and 70 to 79 was a C, and 60 to 69 was a D. Yeah? I think sometimes now in other colleges they don't have that. There's like they've got rid of that. But let's just say that from 0 to 59 is an F. So red, orange, and yellow are 0 to 59. Light green and dark green are D, C, B, and A. What we can say here, if we're going to use that sort of conceptual framework, is that almost all of us are failures. This is the nature of the supply chain. On the left, antioxidants. Antioxidants, health-giving compounds. You may have heard that. 4.92, 195. That's a 40x variation. You'd have to eat 40 of the carrots on the left to get as many antioxidants as if you ate one of the carrots on the right. That's not a 4% variation. That's a 40x variation. Peak of the curve is in the 17th percentile? No, 13th percentile. Polyphenols, very powerful health-giving compounds, reverse cancer, reverse chronic disease broadly. 2.34, 49.75, 20x variation, peak of the curve in the 7th percentile. This, again, is just the data for carrots, but anybody who wants to look at it, we've got it for potatoes and beets and squash and tomatoes and Swiss chard and kale and leeks and wheat and oats and apples and blueberries. Multiple continents, multiple years. From what we can tell, this is reasonably the nature of what is being produced. These are called violin plots. On top, you say it says BQI score. So this is an average of 6 elements and 2 compounds. This is not nutrient density. What you'll hopefully understand from the end of this presentation is we do not know what nutrient density is from a Western empirical rational standpoint. I would argue that it is what causes something to be flavorful and aromatic. It is what is experienced by our beinghood as causing us to be more coherent, be more light, be more resonant, be more vibrant. So if you are looking at external Western rational instrumentation and formal published peer-reviewed papers, we do not know what nutrient density is. I would argue we are all wired with actually incarnating through a profound instrument of perception called our body. And actually, that is the truth. For each one of us, it's really about how we experience something. And it's our ability to focus our attention on that experience, which is the grounding of true, insight. But right now, we're engaging in the externalized Western rational framework, which is, trying to find broad averages, not dealing with each of our own unique nuance. But that's where we're at, right? I hope this is a bait and switch. I call it a spiritual covert op. We create a shiny object. We remind people that actually their tongue and their nose are profound instruments of perception, right? But we're going to use the shiny object to catch people's attention because they seem to be, relatively bird-minded at this moment. Not saying anything bad about birds, but you know what I'm trying to say. So on the left, we've got variety. Some people said it's the variety that matters. We've got Napoli, Bolero, Nantes, Mokum, Romance, Yaya. People may be familiar with some of these carrot varieties. What I see here is that you can take a Napoli seed and you can put it into one soil and have a relatively low nutrient level, and put it into a different soil and have a relatively high nutrient level. Similarly with Bolero and Nantes and Mokum, etc. I am not seeing that there's a causal relationship between variety and nutritional value. On the right, these are by climate region, USDA climate region, Northeast, East, North Central, Southeast, Central. So these are different parts of the U.S. Some are cold and wet and certain types of soil. Some are hot and dry and other types of soil. Some are hot and wet, different kinds of soil. So we're looking at the whole, U.S. 48 contiguous states, which is a bunch of different climate zones and soil types. Again, in the Northeast, where a lot of our, allies are, because that's where we're from, and a lot of those allies are small, organic, regenerative, no-till people. There's not a lot of dark greens. There's a bunch of reds and even more oranges. East, North, Central, Southeast, Central. I don't see any correlation between spot, inherent nature of the soil or the climate, and nutritional value. I see you can do a good job anywhere and you can do a bad job anywhere. This is point of purchase, sample source. On the top is farm. Second one is store. Third one is garden. Fourth one is farmer's market. Anybody who's got their identity attached with their scale, or good and bad have to do with where I get things. There's lots of not good things grown in gardens, and there's some really good things bought in stores. Just because you are operating on a small scale does not mean you are operating well. Just because you're operating on a large scale does not mean you're operating poorly. Okay, this one's the worst one, or the best one, depending on how you look at it. By practice. These are by identities. I refer to this as religion. I'm a Presbyterian, therefore I'm superior to you because you're a Methodist. I'm a Catholic, therefore I'm superior to you because you are a Hindu. I'm pretty sure it's your relationship with God that matters, not which set of people you hang out with. Certified organics on top. Cover crops is next. Then no-till. Then till. Then organic. Let's focus on reference and none here. Reference and none is grocery store, not organic. It is very clearly fatter in the yellow there, and in no-till, and let's go down to regenerative right below there. It's fatter in the orange.
Is that self-assessed regenerative?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. This was done in 2020, 2019, 2021. There are some regenerative certifications out there. Everything is farmer claims. I'm claiming to be certified organic. I'm claiming to be organic, not certified. I'm claiming to use cover crops. So we didn't have the capacity to go out and have a third party assess. But most people who were doing these things are proud of these things they're doing, and they were pretty sure that when they sent samples in, they were going to be shown to be really good. Right? We all really think we're great people, but we may actually secretly be aware of flaws and faults, or hopefully we're aware of flaws and faults. Across the board, what I see is there's no identity that correlates with superiority. So I'm sorry I don't have the graphic here, but the only thing that we found that correlated with increased nutrient level was level of life in the soil. Level of life in the soil correlates with increased nutrient levels. Just because you didn't till does not mean you have increased levels of life in the soil. I talked about this yesterday. I said you need air in the soil for microbes to breathe. And you can very proudly not disturb the soil, but if it's actually dirt because it's tight and there's no air, then creating a dynamic where there's air is actually very strategic. Right? It's a living being that is needing to be cared for as a comprehensive, holistic living being. And if you put a bag over its head and zip tie it, it's going to die. Remember that? Those who were yesterday, right? Conversation, right? It's not about these individual identities. It's about engaging a living being, your soil. And only when it's flourishing at high levels of life should we expect the results to be high levels of nutritional value. Everybody's okay with that, or not okay, but the point is conveyed? Okay. So by 2021, we were able to build, as part of the process, we had taken this meter that we built in 2017, and we flashed a light at every carrot, at every cucumber, at every tomato, at every soil sample that came into the lab before we assessed it for the copper and the zinc and the polyphenols and the organic matter, et cetera. Before we took the soil and ran it through the lab, before we took the crop and ran it through the lab, we flashed a light at it with this very rudimentary piece of kit, and took a picture of the light that bounced back, which looked like peaks and valleys in a graph, right? It was just a spectral signature. So by 2021, we had enough data to take those peaks and valleys on a graph and overlay them against the nutrient levels and be able to find some calibrations. So we released this meter in 2021. We sold about 300 of them around the world. There may be some people in this room that bought one. There certainly were, I think, a couple dozen at least from Australia who purchased them. We very, very clearly told people this was not a nutrient density meter. This is a functioning proof of concept, which basically means it is possible to build a consumer-priced flash of light meter that can give you scientifically legitimate, quote unquote, statistically significant assessments of nutrient levels. So if you were to be testing a carrot, our calibration was only good for antioxidants. We didn't say it was nutrient density. We didn't say it was a bunch of different nutrients. We said for carrots, if you use this to flash a light at a carrot, we'll give you a number that says this carrot's in the 60th percentile of what we found, or the 40th percentile of what we found, and that had an R squared that was 0.75 or whatever. So statistically significant. For zucchini, it was only polyphenols. So we had calibrations for 10 different crops where we were able to say it is possible to build a handheld, consumer-priced flash of light meter that gives you real-time, honest, scientific responses on specific nutrients, not nutrient density, just specific nutrients. This is a proof of concept. We wrote that all over the website. We said it in all of our recordings. People said, finally, the meter you've been talking about, Dan, is here. And they got it. And they said, but it doesn't do apples. But no one has antioxidants. I'm like, that's what we told you. But people want something to be true before it's actually true. And so we stopped making them because it doesn't do what you want it to do. We are a nonprofit educational organization. That's what we call it in the US. That means an NGO in the rest of the world, non-governmental organization. Everything we do is open source. Everything we do is in the commons. The specs for how to build this are open and on our website. It is open source, copy left, not copy right, which means anybody who wants to build 1,000 of them and sell them is entirely welcome to do so. Right? We are not trying to control this. In fact, we are specifically trying to facilitate mutual empowerment. But we also know that this is nowhere near sophisticated enough to do what we think needs to be done. But the real question is, what the hell is quality? You can't build a meter to test quality until you've defined what quality is, which is where we're at. We're now in the process of trying to figure out what quality is. So we started this process at the end of 2021. We chose beef as the first foodstuff that we're looking at in an attempt to define quality, nutrient density. The rationale was that if we are going to attempt to have some meaningful impact on reality, the thing that is used, that the thing that people eat that is grown on more land than anything else is beef. If we want to have a meaningful impact on the ecosystem, we want to use the market to positively shift the way that the land is treated. Let's focus on something that has a major impact. Cucumbers are nice, probably would have been a lot cheaper and easier to do, but there's not that many acres on the planet that are used to produce cucumbers. And this is an expensive science project. It's $1 million plus per crop. So we chose beef to start with. The hypothesis was that if cows eat what cows have been eating for millions of years, they're likely to be better for you than if cows eat what they've been eating for the last 100 years, which perhaps is not too revolutionary of a thesis for you, at least those in this room, although for some it is quite threatening. The basic protocol here was we had farmers send in a steak from 3 different animals. Again, the triplicate sample strategy, you want to get statistically significant data. You don't want to have, to be able to throw out outliers. So 3 animals, 1 steak from each of 3 animals, all raised in a similar fashion. We started off looking at about 800 different compounds in each one of those steaks in an untargeted metabolomic analysis. At the end of the process now, we're only looking actually at about 100 different nutrients, but they're very targeted. So we have specific numbers like 4 ppm or whatever, not 4x each other. So 100 different nutrients in each steak, from vitamins and enzymes and fatty acids and polyphenols and elements, etc. For each animal, we ask also as well that they send in a fecal sample that we're using to assess the microbiome of the animal. So we're looking at over 200 different species in multiple kingdoms, levels and presence and levels of these different microbes. As well, we're looking at the species of plants that animal consumed. So we're able to verify the nature of the fodder, how many different plants, which plants. Each plant has its own, unique biochemistry. Those markers you can figure out. We also had people send in the fodder of what the animal was eating, so we could assess that for nutrient levels. So we could look at not just what the type of plant was, but what was in those plants. We had people send in the soil that their fodder grew in. So if you're feeding your cows corn, send us the soil in from your cornfield. You're feeding them hay, send us in the hay field. If you're out there in pasture, give us the soil from the pasture. We asked a bunch of management questions about the gender, the age, the genetics, the management practices. You know, are you moving them on a daily basis? Are they stuck in one spot for 6 months, etc.? And finally, not up here, a subset of this beef was fed to humans. So people eat this beef this week, and we measure their inflammation markers and in their urine and blood, and then they eat this beef next week, and we measure the inflammation markers in urine and blood, and then finally we fed them fake meat, and we can see what the inflammation markers in their blood and urine are from that. So the concept here is we are creating a metadata set where we're looking at all these different, empirical metrics in relationship to each other. We're at this point now where we are launching what we're calling the Bionutrient Definition Standards Board. So we're welcoming microbiologists to be on the committee that looks at the microbiome data and tells us which animals they think were most well and scale them. This was the best, this was the worst, and here they are in order. Biochemists can look at the biochemistry data and say, we think these levels and ratios of compounds are most optimal for human health and least optimal, and scale everything in the middle. We take the human health data, we give that to, medical people and say, you tell us which inflammation markers look best and worst. The agronomists, the forage and soil data, and none of them get to see what each other's doing, right? The microbiologists don't get to see the list that the biochemists came up with, etc. So our thought is we engage the Western rational scientific framework as holistically as possible to look for the patterns of nature, right? Our thought is this is original research. We don't presume to know the answer. We presume that nature has patterns. And if we can go through the process of empirically, engaging this honestly and broadly, we will find patterns. This is the thesis. And we're in process right now. This is an expensive process. We are a very small charitable organization. Capital is our limiting factor. So I'll just leave that there. And we're going to keep doing it. It's going to happen as fast as the money comes in. So I'm going to get 5 questions. Dan, when's this going to happen? How soon is it going to happen? When are you going to have a meter? We are a charitable, nonprofit educational organization. We're doing this in the commons. There is no opportunity for investment. There is no IP, intellectual property opportunity. There is no ROI, return on investment opportunity. This is only a karma opportunity, right? We need about $1 million a crop is our proposal. And how many crops do you want to do? 5, 10, 20, 50? We propose this as an iterative, evolving process. The understandings we come out with initially, we hope will be more sophisticated in 3 years and even perhaps quite good in 5 years. We want this to evolve over time. We don't want it to be a static thing. We hope that our definition of excellence now is at the 90th percentile in 3 years and perhaps at the 80th percentile in 5 years, because the caliber of food that people are producing has caused the high bar to move, right? This is not a static binary, you are organic or not, you are regenerative or not model. This is a continuum-based model, right? 80 out of 100, 40 out of 100, 20 out of 100. That's the sort of conceptual framework behind this endeavor. Again, it's not anything that anyone we are aware of has ever done. So we're really basically making it up, trying to be as honest as possible, but we don't have a pathway to follow. It's just intuition and, as much integrity as we can handle. It's a work in process. Here's a map of the sample sources. There actually are a few more samples from Australia than this map shows you, but we do have a bunch of samples from the UK, a couple from South America, but broadly they're coming from all across North America. A really broad suite of environmental conditions in North America. That's that. Preliminary results. As I said, we have not come to a conclusion yet. There is this thing called omega-3, omega-6, which some people have heard of, which correlates with inflammation. People may have heard about inflammation and understand that it connects nicely to chronic disease. In most cases, as I understand it, people eating what they call the modern Western diet have too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3, and that correlates with excess levels of inflammation. So that being said, those animals who were eating green things up until they died had an average level of omega-6, omega-3 of 1.7 to 1. Those animals which were eating not all grain, but some grain, had an average of 7.8 to 1. You can see that some were 3.5, some were 14.4, so it's the range. I think the American Heart Association says anything more than 4 to 1 is bad for you. I think they say that people who were sort of in traditional cultures, indigenous cultures through millennia, had a diet averaging around 2 or 2.5 to 1. This grass-fed, grass-finished, those were eating green things up until they died. That's polycultures, that's monocultures, that's perennials, that's annuals. And look at how closely they're all stacked in there, except for those few outliers. This was done during COVID, and we had one company that was a partner in this process, which sells hundreds of millions of dollars worth of beef a year, that gets a lot of their meat from Australia. They had a boat or two full of beef stuck in the ocean right outside of LA because of the issues with all the other logistics of COVID. And so they went and bought beef from a supplier they didn't know, who claimed that their beef was grass-fed. And they sent us in those samples. And we can see that they sure don't look like everything else. Truthfully, almost all cows eat grass at some point in their life. So you could say all cows are grass-fed and be, honest. Do you know what pasture finished means in the beef industry? They dump grain on the pasture. They're finished on the pasture, but it doesn't mean that they didn't eat grain. They weren't in a CAFO, they were in a pasture, but that doesn't mean you can't dump grain in the pasture. The reality of marketing and labeling is such that people read the label and want it to mean what they want it to mean, and the person who's making the claim knows it means technically what they say it means. And we are, most of us, honorable people. We want to trust. Our basic operating system is we trust. Anybody gone through the process of learning that not everyone is trustworthy? Over and over and over again. The bigger the system, the more bureaucratic the structure, the more distant and impersonal the structure, the actual less likely they're trustworthy. And yet we still operate with a place of trust because we are actually deeply good. Anybody who says human nature is bad, I got a bone to pick with you. I'm pretty sure we're actually brilliant, amazing beings. And we come from that place almost always, almost all the time. There are some sociopaths out there who take advantage of that. But this is part of the opportunity here with empiricism, with hiding behind the Western rational, logical, empirical framework, is we can not need labels and certifications and claims. We can actually have a wand of truth. We can have, what does a friend of mine call it? A weapon of mass creation. We can have a scientific instrument in our hand because we haven't learned yet to trust our nose and our tongue and our subtle senses of perception, right? Most of us have been removed, have not been trained in, from childhood, those capacities that we have, which are so profound to perceive and discern, even though most of us have come to it through the school of hard knocks, that we actually do have these internal capacities to perceive, but we still override that with our thoughts and what we're told and stuff. So it's a process of re-indigenizing, I would say, of reconnecting to our inherent, beautiful, profound natures. At any rate, we can see a spectrum of variation. We can see that cows that eat grain, some of them don't eat much, and they're actually roughly better and some eat not a lot at all, and they're roughly worse. There's a continuum here. And being able to say 20 out of 100, 40 out of 100, 80 out of 100 is a much more specific way of engaging the conversation as opposed to saying good, bad, regenerative, not regenerative, which implies good, bad, organic, not organic, which implies good, bad. We just saw how good organic is. Right? We saw how some stuff, which is not organic, actually looks quite good. This is, again, preliminary data. It looks like the diversity correlates with quality, right? With the plants, it's the level of life in the soil that correlates with quality. With the animals, it's the diversity in the ecosystem that correlates with quality. All right, I've got, I think, 20 minutes left, which is great. I've got this new slide, which I feel embarrassed about, but it's, if you want to get involved or potentially support us, you can engage whatever that thing is. I really don't like those things, but I know some people use them. Yeah, so from a practical standpoint, this is a science project, which costs money. And like I said, we're proposing it's around $1 million a crop. We're hopefully we'll be done with beef this year. Not this year, next year. And we're starting wheat. If we can do multiple things simultaneously, we want to do potatoes and milk as well. So we've got a meat and a grain and a root and a liquid, crop by crop. If we had 100,000 people, each giving us $5 a month, which is what it costs to be a member of the BFA, this thing is golden. 100,000 people, $5 a month, out of 8 billion. I would propose that should be a not unreasonable ask, and yet we are nowhere close to it. Nowhere close to it. So that's because I have never had this slide before. I always forget to say, hey, if you're inspired, now's your chance. 10 minutes? This says 10:40. That's not true.
No, I just thought you might open up for some questions.
Yeah, I am.
I'm going to sit down again because
Okay.
I think you've got that.
Yeah, but I thought I had more than 10 minutes left.
Yeah, you do.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. I'm done. Oh, I'm good. Yeah.
Dan, that was fantastic. Absolutely love to hear you delivering all of this. I came across nutrient density a little while ago and it's had a really big impact on how we're farming and how I'm feeding my family.
Brilliant.
Are you documenting this on any kind of film or any kind of
No.
writing and such like? We've followed the work of Peter Vick. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've
of course.
followed
Yeah.
Recently, he's been to the farm
Yeah.
and visited us. And I think ways to reach, how are we reaching more people? How can we all play a part in this apart from all donation, of course?
Well, money is the least of it. I mean, $5 a month or your attention and effort and skills are much more relevant. It's a question of, do you want to step up and be a partner in this process or just sort of root for us, which is totally great, and pass the word around. Yeah. I guess I'm not sure if I'm proud or embarrassed to say this, but someone asked me a day or two ago, how big is the BFA? Maybe yesterday. I said, technically, at the moment, 2.5 FTEs. So we scale up and down depending on how many people we're formally paying and how many people we're partnering with and things like that. Full-time equivalent. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, so I believe in symbiosis. I don't believe in being and controlling everything. I believe that if someone is inspired to engage through social media and posting and creating posts and posting them, awesome. If someone wants to write, let them write. If you need us to pay you for you to be involved, I can't help you there. But if you think this is important and you have skills and passion and unique capacities, which we all do, and you think this is important, then I completely welcome your engagement. Yeah, it was Pasture for Life. It was all those UK sample, so I'm not sure if you guys are part of Pasture for Life, but yeah. Sorry. Yes, next time. Go for it.
Dan, you and I spoke yesterday and the day before
Yeah.
about the challenge of defining or operationalising the concept of nutrient density.
Yeah.
Do you have some preliminary thoughts about what is needed? Is it complex statistics? Is it more data? Like, what do you think is the missing piece, or why you don't think that you can yet define it?
I think we're in process, and we're now, after having collected complex data, in the process of being able to needing to do the statistical work. So that's for beef, and then we have to go out and raise the money for wheat, and then we have to collect the data for wheat, and then we have to do the statistical work for wheat, and that just needs to iterate with potatoes and milk and everything else. So I see this as a very, like, I mean, if you break it down into component parts, a logical stepwise process, which can be identified, raise the money, or actually what you should really do first is you should design the study, because with wheat, there's all kinds of really interesting dynamics that are not the same as for beef. And so when we're looking at what is quality in wheat, and most people are not eating wheat berries, they're eating some product that comes from wheat, I've learned an amazing amount. Well, there's a couple things I didn't talk about here with omega-6, omega-3s, which I'll just go there for a second. Anybody who, on a farm like I grew up on, has chickens and chicken tractors and pigs out on pasture, but actually gives them grain, has meat or eggs that has inappropriately high levels of omega-6. You can be a certified organic, pastured poultry, and have unhealthy levels of these compounds, and that's uncomfortable. The ancient wheats versus the modern wheats. How about, is it a stone grind or is it a roller mill? The roller mill actually does a lot of destructive things. So post-harvest, how you engage, is it just white flour? Is it fermented? There's all kinds of nuances here for us to be able to build the data set necessary to calibrate an instrument that a consumer could use, which would give them real-time meaningful information. And so the design of the study for each crop does require some serious thoughtfulness. And there are brilliant people in the field of wheat around the world on different components. Let's engage them. Let's engage the people who actually deeply are, part of this process already. Let's not ignore them. Let's actually weave them into the process, right? So, but it is, I think, systemically, the way I see it is this: it's a stepwise process.
I really believe that you could start with what you have and then build on it. So you could build a machine that is able to have data, like software updates, if you
Yep.
like, as more and more data comes
Right.
in. And I think it would be incredibly useful.
That's the idea. It's just an iterative process. We come up with one basic definition first, and then as data continues to evolve, we have a standards board which meets every 2 years and updates that definition. And our thought is, we're not a company. We're not making meters. We're putting together our definition of quality, and any company that wants to build a meter that builds one that does what we think is a good job, we tell the world, buy this. And someone else who builds one we think does a bad job, we tell the world, don't buy that. The only thing we have is our integrity, is our honor, is our word. And if we as a global movement put the word out that these guys are lying and these guys are legit, do we operate with that integrity as our foundation to engage this process? Yeah. Over there.
Just trying to get my head around the omega-6, omega-3
Yeah.
So what you're talking about a lot is the grass-fed beef has a better ratio than grain-fed beef. But do you also measure that in humans? So I'm eating grass-fed beef. Do you test my omega-6-3 ratio compared to someone who's eating
No.
chicken McNuggets? So that's not a human nutritional measurement.
We fed 20 people grass-fed beef, and we assessed their blood and their urine and said, what is your body's response to this beef and to that beef?
So the 6-3 ratio is in the food that we are eating. So you're testing.
That's one of 100 different compounds. This is preliminary data. This is just one thing, and it's a complex, real serious pain in the butt. Like, this is not my idea of fun. Sorry. The question was, are we testing the omega-3, omega-6 in people? No, we're not. We're testing the inflammation markers in people to see how the overall consumption of this steak affected their bodies versus the overall consumption of that steak versus the overall consumption of that fake meat with a simple thing called inflammation markers. So this is the kind of thing where tens of millions of dollars could be used to define quality in any crop, right? This should be done by national governments on a global scale. This should not be done by some podunk little nonprofit. This is completely inappropriate for us to be doing this. And I cannot believe the fact that we've been talking about it for 15 years and there's nobody else out there doing it. At some point, if somebody wants to help out, really, really welcome support. Yes.
You said that, my question is the way of farming seems to
Yeah.
be relevant for
Massively.
So if you get to where you want to be, where we can all measure our supermarket and food in the supermarket, what do you see the pathway is to actually increasing nutrient density in the food if the way of farming is essentially irrelevant?
No, the way of farming is entirely relevant. So the question is, does the way you farm affect quality? Categorically. The whole point, including yesterday's presentation, is only when you deal with your land like it's a living, sentient being and care for it, should you expect what comes from it to be of high caliber. And if you just check boxes to say, I'm certified organic or I'm regenerative, you could be engaging your land like it's a factory floor, like it's a chemistry set. And that will not give you the results. The point is, we're not just defining quality, we're identifying environmental conditions that are causal. And it's all open source. And we're providing all this information to everyone on the planet. And we're saying, let's learn and share together in symbiosis, in the model of nature, where you have all these different microbes working in symbiosis. It's not just me hiding what I do and you hiding what you do. It's all of us openly sharing. And if there are certain products that work, let that be known. If there's certain products that don't work, let that be known. Let's all openly engage in a collaborative process of discernment and mutual empowerment. And that's the way we think we'll accomplish this systemic healing, is if we can open source this, if we can quorum sense, I think is the technical term, right? If we can quorum sense, if we can get out of our fear and separation and understand there's enough of us that together we are actually mutually empowered to begin to share, that's how we succeed. And we're hiding behind this Western rational empirical method because that's the lingua franca of the day. But deeply within, we know we're actually profound spiritual beings. And we're in this dance with that and big business and governments and everything else. Yes?
On that, with the graph you showed earlier about the carrots,
Yeah.
the carrots that were performing in the 90th percentile and the high end, was that the same carrot? Did you follow the carrot's history? And
So
one farming practice always one.
this is something we don't know, and I welcome giving this data to anybody who wants to look at it. We have open sourced all this stuff. We are a small organization. I don't know. We have not had the time and energy to even publish the papers that verify that. We have only one published paper so far. It was in Nature. It showed the meters worked. It showed the variations massive. The things that need to be done are massive. The help we need is massive. We have 2.5 people on the planet of 8 billion working on this. Do not look to me for answers. Help out.
I don't actually know what to say after that, Dan. I mean, the words that you speak, the work that you are doing is a gift to humanity. And if there was a bucket, I would be handing it around right now and saying, put $10 in it for Dan. I would say if you can do anything at this festival, it's scan that code and become a member, get involved, because this is such a beautiful community of people. And to be given a gift like this, which is really going to connect all of the things that we do as farmers, smallholders, growers, this is the connect with what we're doing. And it doesn't matter what we call it or which club we profess to be part of. We're all part of this club. And on behalf of all of us, thank you. Thank you.